Once again, good evening, everyone. John Tabor, President of Loudon Photo Club. We are here for speaker night. This evening's speaker is Jack Brennan. He's a member of our very own club. He's taken photographs over the course of a few decades, and the initial inspiration for photography was the stunning natural settings seen while backpacking and climbing in wilderness areas of the western U.S. During the last decade or so, Jack has pursued photography in a more focused, concentrated manner. This has included joining photo clubs, buying digital camera equipment, and going on outings to photograph a variety of places and subjects. Nature remains his primary subject and source of inspiration, from landscapes to wildlife, birds, and flowers, but he appreciates architecture, cityscapes, and occasional people as well. With populations growing and moving into cities, 60% by 2030, increasingly our daily experience is indoors with the human-built environment. Disconnect with nature is growing, as are the consequences of human activities that undermine the natural systems we need to live. So it is his intention that sharing images of the profound and delicate beauty of nature may help to preserve our conscious contact with nature and improve our choices for the future. Tonight's speaker, Jack Brennan.
Hello, fellow photography fans. Let's see, I share. There we go. And let me apologize up front. I discovered that my camera has crapped out, so I would be there in visually if I could, but we'll just have to concentrate on the pictures part instead. Let me see here. I'm trying to get anybody. There we go. Hey, my question answered. Okay, so I started out with sort of a loose chronological order of some places.
Hey, Jack, just to be sure, we do see your desktop, but it's just your primary desktop screen.
So you don't see Acadia National Park?
Correct, we do not.
Okay. How do I? Let's see. Stop. You are screen sharing. You share. Well. How about that?
Oh, your home screen is interesting.
There we go. Now it's the Acadia.
Oh, good. Yeah, this is, and I apologize in advance. This is my first time running PowerPoint in Zoom, and well, it's been a while since I've done a PowerPoint. Let's see if clicking. Yeah, hey, it does. Okay, good. Oops, wait a minute. Can I go backwards? Is that shift click or something? Uh-oh.
You can use the cursor keys on your keyboard to go left and right.
Oh, okay. Much better. There we go. Okay, so yeah, Acadia National. This was, the sun actually came out at one point, and I spent a couple of days in a tent doing a lot of reading in the rain, and then it got pretty nice. And here's the view. If you make it up to Cadillac Mountain, which I've been told now you have to like make a reservation, you know, for a time slice, because you can drive to the top and then it's sort of a big traffic jam the whole way up. But you can see when it's nice weather that there's a heck of a view. And this is looking north and east, I would say. Over on the far left is you see a kind of an island, and there's a little, almost looks like a strip of sand or something. Which is probably what it is, like a sandbar. Anyway, and that is the iconic Bahaba. So if you want to go, that's right near to Cadillac Mountain. And pretty crazy in the summertime. And then, so this is going from Virginia up through Cape Cod, and then Maine, and then here I crossed the border into Canada, New Brunswick. The Bay of Fundy is it starts, the mouth of it is not too far from the Maine New Brunswick border, and then it carries on up, and on one side is Nova Scotia, and on the other side is New Brunswick. And so this is low tide, and in preparing for this presentation, I went to do some homework. The average difference between high tide and low tide, the number of feet, that the water goes up and down, globally, the average is about 3 feet or so. However, at Hopewell Rocks and the Bay of Fundy in general, the vertical difference between high tide and low tide, anybody want to guess? 52 feet. So, and you can see that the rocks are getting worn away underneath. And actually in the background, you can see kind of muddy looking water, and that's the Bay of Fundy in the background. And then the weather started coming in, as was the tide, and so we all started to make our way. There's a big steel stairway that goes down to the beach level and then back up to where you can get away from the water. Pretty cool spot, kind of unusual to be able to, walk around when the tide's out on the bottom of the ocean. And carrying on, so from New Brunswick, this was a trip that had some genealogical significance for me, because on my mother's side, my family came over from Scotland to Pictou, Nova Scotia. And so I went up there to see. I was there when I was a little kid, geez, way back. But and the sunrise here is actually this is called the Northumberland Strait, and you can see a little bit of land on the horizon, and that's Prince Edward Island, PEI as they call it, in that neck of the woods. And so yeah, I was poking around up there at Caribou Provincial Park, and got up, and this is the sunrise. And then I guess this bird here must have come from parts south of there, I mean, all bald eagles are American, right? Well, maybe this was an exception. There's a Canadian guy there. And there's the ferry going to Newfoundland and Labrador from Pictou in the morning as I was walking around. And then this is looking, so I was heading for the end of the northeast corner of the North American continent, really. So the north end of Nova Scotia is Cape Breton, and the land runs out. And there is a part of Newfoundland off in the distance, but that's across the water. And there's further, I mean, if you go around to Newfoundland and Labrador, that's further north. But as far as like sort of the northeast corner of North America, so that's what it looks like if you're there. And then that was in 2016. So then in 2017, a much shorter trip, but I went in August of 2017. There was a total solar eclipse. Some of you may have seen it, remember it. From here, it was a partial, but I wanted to, so I drove to where I could intersect with the path of the totality, where the, you know, the moon gets all the way, the shadow of the moon is complete, and it's pretty wild. And there's all these people in a park in downtown Greenville, waiting for the event. And after some time, it began to look kind of like that. It was, so when you're before this moment of totality, you got to have a solar filter for your eyeballs and for your electronics. Both of them will be fried otherwise, especially if you've got, you know, a long lens that's magnifying and you're pointing it at the sun. Look out. And you can see at like 1 or 2 o'clock, and then 3 o'clock, and at 5 o'clock, excuse me, some kind of reddish blobs there. Those are called coronal mass ejections. And, you know, this is 93 million miles away, and there's just this inconceivably large masses of plasma that are being blasted off the surface of the sun. And under the right circumstances, you can see it. That's what it looks like. And yeah, and so when the eclipse becomes total, then you take off your filters off of your camera and your eyeballs, and the light is it's sort of dreamlike almost, very strange and very cool. And so then this is kind of a composite thing, but the upper part of the image is the beginning. So the totality is starting to pass. And this phase is called the diamond ring. You'll probably guess why. And across the bottom is what you actually see is the shadow of the moon in each subsequent from right to left. The shadow of the moon passing across the sun, total in the middle, and then beginning to move away in the left half of the. And for you Caps fans, at that time in 2018, I was still working, and I worked on at Constitution and 14th downtown. And one day, guess who came by? There's Ovechkin holding the Stanley Cup. over his head, and the owner, what's his name? Waving to his fans. So there you go. That day we were all caps. And then this is so later on in 2018, I joined his family and we went to Hawaii. And this is a sublime, idyllic shot of Banzai Beach on Oahu. And then a couple of shots in Waikiki and in I can't remember the name of, there's some pretty cool gardens that are not too far from Waikiki that we went on. And I liked whatever that plant is called. I didn't do my due diligence to be able to tell you what it is, but it's a cool looking. And then over on the Big Island, I got some friends who live there, and I went and stayed for a week. And you can actually drive to the top of Mauna Loa, 14,000 and change. And up there are a number of observatories because it sticks out of a lot of the atmosphere, you know. And so I went up for sunrise, and this is the beginnings of the dawn. And then, you know, that thing that you hear if you join photography groups and somebody says, you know, when you're really into taking some pictures of something that's just fully got your attention, stop and turn around, because sometimes there's surprising things behind you as well. And that's what was behind me. And so there's kind of two sort of dawns in the sky, more observatories. And if you notice, there's sort of a shadow on the right-hand part of the, I'll call it alpenglow for lack of, I don't know what they call it in the islands, but in the Alps, they call it alpenglow. And what we actually see there is the shadow of Mauna Kea, which is the volcanic cone, well, it's a shield, but volcano to the east of Mauna Loa. And so it's partially blocking the rising sun. I thought that was kind of cool. So yeah, and if you look in the bottom of the image, that light section there on the ground is frost, and you know, and this was, well, September, but it's still, summer hadn't ended. But at 14,000 feet, it gets kind of chilly at night. And yeah, there's kind of the other side of the observatories, looking out, I guess, south, maybe a little southeast. And so then, and I'm not real happy with the saturation of this image, but the colors of the last three images kind of stuck in my mind. And the sort of alpenglow of the dawn and the sunrise, and the great greens and blues in the water. This is sort of a composite image that, and this is the challenge of, you know, monitor calibration, color calibration, and even what apps do to two images. I've had, you know, plenty that on a screen look one way and then go to like stick them into Word for something, and then they look different. Well, anyway, so you can see how I maybe came to this idea of combining these different colors into one sort of spectrum of, there we go. And jumping forward to 2019, and this is the people who get there to Grand Canyon see stuff like this. This is the parking lot view. And, you know, I did, and this is one of my favorite places on the planet. And I've been there many times, and I have, back when I used to backpack and carry all that crap around on my back, yeah, about a dozen times. Spent literally a couple of months in the Grand Canyon, and there's and it is, you know, there's lots of other canyons nearby that you can day hike. Grand Canyon's really not for 99 point something percent of the population. There are a few crazy people who are also very fit that have, you can go down from the rim, the south rim, and go down about a vertical mile to the river, the Colorado River, and then back up again all in one day. God help us, but mostly it's an overnight deal. And so anyway, after backpacking in the Grand Canyon a bunch of times, I decided while I could still do it, I was going to do a rafting trip on the river, which is a whole other thing. I mean, first of all, once you're in the Grand Canyon, it is just a totally, completely different world that is really kind of unimaginable as an experience. I mean, the concept, I mean, you can look at the pictures and stuff, but taking your body in there and moving around is something altogether incredible. And so anyway, I took this picture the day before. Me and a bunch of other folks who are going to be rafting, we went down to the river from Grand Canyon Village, going from the put-in spot in Page, Arizona, upstream to where you take out, and in this case Hualapai Canyon way downstream, is a 2-week trip. And I had walked some of that anyway, and it ain't cheap either. So a bunch of us went for the 9-day deal, where the first 5 days you don't do that part. You walk down and meet the rest of your group. And there we are at about halfway down. It was once called Indian Gardens. I've heard they changed the name recently. I can't tell you what it is, but I will find out. And yeah, and this is where, if you've ever taken a mule ride, this is where the mules come down to, and then they've got they turn around and go back up. And so these are some of my fellow rafters, and we then proceeded from Indian Gardens down toward the river, and you can see now it's all a kind of gnarly looking rock that is ahead. And it is gnarly. That rock has been severely gnarled. It is, if you look in the far left-hand edge of the picture, you'll see that there's sedimentary rock with, horizontal lines. And then the rock starts looking very different, and it's all like just all beat up and stuff. And that's because, fun fact, the rock, the sedimentary rock, the Tepete sandstone, is about 500 million years old. And then the rock that it sits on top of, which is the Vishnu schist group, is metamorphic. It's been way down and like had massive pressure and heat and all this. That rock is 1.4 billion years old. So what's missing? Well, about 900 million years is missing, literally. And this is called the Great Unconformity. And because the timeline it's not conforming to the timeline, right? So what happened was, at one point long ago, that the area that is now Grand Canyon was low. It was being subject to deposition. So stuff was flowing in and accumulating and, stacking up and making these incredible, sedimentary formations we see. But then there was uplift, and what had once been low became high. And now, instead of stuff getting deposited there, erosion began to take it all away to other parts lower down. And so for 900 million years, that whole cycle of deposition, was reversed, and it was all erosion. And then more tectonic goings on, and it became a low spot again, and stuff started accumulating, depositing there, and the sediments accumulated that you can see above that gnarly looking rock. And the Colorado, what's today the Colorado River, has been, cutting through that rock and above for the last 500 million years. Pretty cool, huh? And so there's the view. We're almost to the river, and there's our rafting group at Boat Beach, just above the Trinity Rapids, as I recall. And so, yeah, we're sort of rubber-legged by this point, and ready to get into, sit down in a raft and ride on the river. And so here's a couple of stops along the way. The left-hand photograph is a place called Elves Chasm. And I was there once before, and it took me 5 days of walking to get to this place. Whereas with rafting, we were there like the next day and moving on. But yeah, it's just amazing. And you can see a couple people swimming, and you can, if you swim all the way, and it is, yes, quite chilly water. But you can climb up in the back and like climb up to that, the rock you can jump off from the like middle of the sort of waterfall. And there's great maidenhair, ferns, and just this very kind of magical place. And then the right-hand picture, we did a side trip up either Deer Creek or Stone Creek. I get those two confused sometimes, but yeah, really nice. And I like the people for scale. And here we stopped for lunch. And they're starting to put stuff together for us, and we scampered away to find some shade while they got things ready. But you know, pretty nice venue for lunch. And one great thing about the desert in the spring is in front of us now. The yeah, very harsh, demanding circumstances. You get a little bit of water and wow. These are beaver tail prickly pear cactus in bloom. And man, I just backpacking and you know, and like sweating bullets and going by those, man, I'm just thinking pink lemonade, really cold pink lemonade. Anyway, so yeah, and I had my birthday in the canyon, and it was on, and that day there, that's that one's either Deer Creek or Stone. One's one and one's the other. But yeah, we cooled off in the waterfall there on my birthday, and it was very cool because and that was in 2019. And I shared with my fellow rafters that 40 years ago that day, I had celebrated my birthday in 1979 in the Grand Canyon. And so that was a nice kind of, you know, closing of the loop. And on the right hand picture is a that is Jimson weed, Datura inoxia. It's the seeds are poisonous and hallucinogenic. So there you go. And these are pictures of Havasu Canyon with just gorgeous sort of turquoise water. The Havasu Creek empties into the Colorado River, and the 5 miles or so from the Colorado upstream is still within the boundaries of Grand Canyon National Park, and then it abuts the Havasu Reservation, and it's then a different well, jurisdiction. They and so we hiked up to the edge and back, and there it is. And you know, this is a bunch of old lava, huh? That's what it looks like to me. And this is a good, you know, our unconscious minds our unconscious, when we go out and we're around things that we didn't make, we connect unconsciously and consciously. And there's something that, to me, it's like something out of a dream, or maybe a nightmare if you're having a bad day. But, yeah. And look, there you've got some hedgehog cacti there growing on the lava barrel cacti. And yeah, you can see some tiny little people and rafts there floating along on the river. On the right-hand side, you can see a stratum of old lava. That black bunch of rock there is from, some volcanic activity way back when. And then we're off on the road, and I went by this and thought it looked kind of cool. So I took a picture. They weren't open. I could have done with some coffee, but. And moving on to Canyonlands, and this is actually this is dawn. The view at Grandview Point, which looks out in the far distance on the right, is the Needles district of Canyonlands National Park. This is southeast Utah. And momentarily, we'll see some much closer pictures of those needles. So there are 3 sections or districts of Canyonlands Park. And this is Island in the Sky, and then there's Needles, and then there's the Maze. And they each has their kind of unique characteristics. This is from the Needles district looking, and those are the Henry Mountains in the background. So I mean, usually the juxtaposition of mountains and desert canyons is kind of unusual. I see mountains, I think of, lots of evergreen trees and snow and stuff. And this is one of the cool things about southern Utah that's you don't see lots of other places. Here's some of those needles from an evening walk along the Slick Rock in Canyonlands Park. And then on to Arches, which where Grand Canyon is very challenging from an accessibility standpoint, with unbelievable views, depending where you get to. I will say Arches is quite accessible, and you can tell by all of the buses, but it's a good thing. So you can do little day hikes, even, just even an hour, and wander around among some very amazing formations outside of Moab, Utah, like this double arch called, of all things, double arch. And another way of looking at that is kind of like that. The trick is to be able to take the picture and not fall over while doing it. And it was springtime like it is now. And let's see, I know those are claret cup hedgehog cactus flowers on the left. And those are sago lilies on the right, both from Canyonlands. A great, you know, this delicate little, not so much on the cacti, but the lilies, you know, among sand and rocks and stuff. What the juxtaposition of this harsh and delicate is very beautiful. And many thousands and thousands of pictures have been taken of this place. And there was a storm coming in, as you can see. And so I got a few shots off before I left and went on to other places. Yeah, Bryce Canyon is amazing. And on actually to Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming. And the bison are having breakfast. Tourists on the far left. Some just amazing colors. I'm a big fan of color. I'm still working to expand my appreciation of the monochrome photography, and because of places like this, that and it's kind of a pale shadow of the real deal, but anyway, that's yeah, hot water and some great, I don't know what the pigment is. I did ask a ranger at one point, but he bullshitted me. Didn't know what he was talking about anyway. And there's the iconic Old Faithful. That day had been largely overcast, and then this was at 7-something p.m. Things cleared up enough that I was able to take this picture. Yeah, it's about a 70-minute cycle that Old Faithful, you know, the water's down there and the magma heats it up some more, and then it expands, and boom, off it goes. And there's an osprey nest with, I believe, the male arriving. Honey, I'm home. And falling water at Yellowstone. Lower Yellowstone Falls from, I think that was from your artist point. And in case you're wondering, it took me quite a while to catch on. There's why they call it Yellowstone Park. And the picture on the right is taken from a place in the picture on the left, just on the right-hand side of that, on the edge of that waterfall. There's, if we were to zoom in, we'd see a little platform with railings, and I was leaning over the railing, taking a picture down into, I think that's a couple 100 feet or more of the waterfall. This was Memorial Day weekend, so you can still see there are vestiges of snow still in the park. And then moving across the state, I left out, I was going to put it in, but I left it out. Between Yellowstone and Devil's Tower, I drove across Wyoming and ended up, my Prius and a deer had a chance and unfortunate encounter, and I then had to drive, and it was amazing. The Prius drove 110 miles after this, collision with a deer to Gillette, where it was either smoke or steam coming out from under the hood. And I pulled into the lodge where I was staying, and that was the last time the car moved under its own power. So there's a big old plug of, not basalt, one of those, an igneous rock, and it cools if you got the right conditions, and it can cool slowly. It forms hexagonal columns, and if you look closely on the right-hand image, you'll see, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I think there's a couple people hidden by the panel on the right, but yeah, people climbing up to the top of Devil's Tower. And you may have seen this. So there's one of the little, there's a mama prairie dog, a bunch of them living around there. And then at night, I was hearing these very strange noises, and I woke up and took this picture. I thought it was a dream, but oh no, wait a minute, maybe it was a movie. That's it. Actually, at the, isn't really a town there, but at the area in the at Devil's Tower National Monument, there's a little kind of concession area and gas station, and there's a store. They have an outdoor TV, and each day at dusk they play Close Encounters of the Third Kind outside, and you can sit outside and watch the show. And that's because they filmed the Spielberg and Truffaut classic. And that's that. I didn't take that picture, in case you were wondering, but I just thought it was it's one of those sort of iconic things that those of us who were old enough to remember the movie, oh yeah, that Devil's Tower, I got it. And then near to Devil's Tower, if you leave Wyoming and cross into South Dakota, are some presidents rocking out at Mount Rushmore National Monument. And then I proceeded from there to through the Black Hills, and I was looking for Rocky Raccoon, but he must have been doing something else. But this was That's some pretty cool kind of hill country, and also got a bunch of bison there too. This guy, I used a long lens, but I was probably, geez, 30 or 40 feet away. I didn't want to get much closer than that. But he was munching away, having breakfast. And I put this picture in just when you get out onto the prairie, and I took, so I was driving from west to east across South Dakota, and the scale of this, even though I did actually sort of a panorama, it's pretty amazing. It's not the Grand Canyon, it's not the, you know, Niagara Falls, but it is these plains that are just go on and on and on, and the cloud, it just you know, it has its own presence and sort of spirit to it. And if you keep going, you get to Badlands National Park. And these are formations that gypsum, soft rock, and not like easy listening, but formations like these. I kind of like this one because it seemed like the clouds were kind of echoing the rocks below. And then I made it all the way across South Dakota. And fun fact, Sioux City encompasses the states of South Dakota, Iowa, and Nebraska. Each state has a chunk of the city, and the Missouri River goes through there. And there is a Lewis and Clark Interpretive Center, and there's the bronze casting of the two, and I can't remember the name of the dog, but he really did accompany them. And I was reading, Stephen Ambrose wrote a book, Undaunted Courage, about the Lewis and Clark expedition. And so it was very cool to go across some of the places that they did and read about what they put up with. Particularly, so from here, and this also between, so with South Dakota, Iowa, and Nebraska, I had completed my 50-state tour of the United States. So Nebraska was the 50th state that I had been in. And from there, I then headed back west, so across Nebraska, and I went across the Rocky Mountains through Rocky Mountain National Park, and you know, and I drove comfortably in my car on a road, and it was the paved highway had opened, was cleared of snow. It was June by then, June, almost July. And to read, putting myself in their shoes, it's not just crossing the Rocky Mountains. They didn't know what they were crossing, how far, when are they going to know if they're there? And when they took off in 1804 or 5, one or the other, all that we knew of the geography of the continent was, as far as the Missouri River and then up, and the Missouri River goes quite a ways, but west of the Missouri was a lot of the terra incognita. And then on the west coast, there a British captain had discovered the mouth of the Columbia River, near Astoria, Oregon today. But between the Missouri and the Pacific, well, they were going to find out. Anyway, and I liked this was the right-hand image was from a coffee beanery, actually in Vernal, Utah, but I needed something to put in there that would, and those of you who are art fans, art history types, this is a riff on the creation of Adam by Michelangelo, but he's getting his coffee, keep things rolling. And Lewis and Clark drank their share of coffee, and they got malaria, and which they treated by taking mercury. And they had a bunch of opium with them, so that when things were really bad, it was not all fun. Lots of mosquitoes and grizzly bears, and much easier driving a car. And so you don't think of volcanoes in Idaho much, but there were some not too long ago. The most recent ones were, what was that? I think 20,000 years ago in at Craters of the Moon. But you can see mountains and volcanic landscape in the same view. And not far away in Idaho, the Sawtooth Mountains. And if you're wondering where they got the name, well, I think that picture probably ought to answer that question. There's trying to remember what the body of water was, or was it a river? No, it was a lake, but that was dusk outside of Stanley, Idaho. And carrying on further west, I made it to Crater Lake. And this was June. And there was just enough road cleared to get to the top. And that was it. There's a road that actually goes around the whole crater, but that wasn't going to be cleared for traffic for another month or two. But there's I did make it for sunrise, and I went back 2 months later, and this was taken from the opposite side of the crater, because that is sunset looking west from in the park. And so here's the thing, if you go to Crater Lake, you've now got the inside scoop. You go to Becky's and you order a blueberry pie, or if the time is right, huckleberry pie for very limited time of the year, and a la mode, and you can bliss out for a little while before you carry on traveling. So you heard it here. And so from Crater Lake to the coast and on to amazing Oregon coast is got some pretty dramatic conditions and that create dramatic features and views. And I came upon this beach and was astounded by what I found. And I was sort of giddy, stumbling around taking pictures of these pools, these sort of braided, there's a creek that drains, empties out on the beach into the ocean. And this is low tide, and so there's a lot of wind with the Oregon coast. There is, unlike, for instance, Puget Sound further north, there is no land to, there is a few thousand miles of open water directly to the west. And so the coast gets a lot of wind, and you can see it in the sand, and you can see it in the water. So this was very cool, because the sand is being sculpted by the wind, and then the water is being sculpted by the wind, and then the light that's bouncing through the water is really being sculpted by the wind too, all at the same time. It was just kind of hypnotic, very otherworldly, and a great cloud cap on Hecate Head. Here's some more of these amazing pools. And so this is 2019. I returned to this very place in 2021 because I had to take some more pictures of this stuff. Man, this, you don't see this every day. And it wasn't there. So it must be, high tide or low tide, or so I went back at high tide and low tide, and this wasn't there. So I have yet to understand what all was going on, but this is what it looked like anyway. Very amazing. And just up the road, of all places, Seal Rock, there were these seals. And this guy's a harbor seal. And I got some, I probably ought to have included this rock. I mean, he was one of, I don't know, 20 seals, and they were all just laying out. That looked like, it was Sunday morning after partying hard Saturday night, all just laying out on this big old rock at the, with the sea right there. And anyway, there he is, or she, I couldn't tell you. And then not far from Seal Rock, these are actually sea lions, not seals, and stellar sea lions. There are actually quite few of them on the Pacific coast. And there's Sea Lion Cave, which is south of Florence. where these guys hang out, and there's the cave part and there's the outdoor part, and you can guess which part this is. But yeah, and there was I don't know what you call a bunch of seals. I know it's a murder of crows, and a gaggle of geese. But anybody know what you call a bunch of sea lions? I don't know. Anyway, and then further along the coast, a day in the life of Ivan the crab. There, it disturbed the gull who was trying to make a crab cake out of him. And, you know, we all have days like this right-hand picture, feeling kind of vulnerable and hoping that somebody doesn't come along and pull your leg off or step on you or something. And moving up the coast of Oregon and into Washington, here is Mount Rainier. And if you want to go visit Rainier, I recommend Paradise, which is where I took this picture from. This sort of an area. It's what is that? That's kind of sort of southwest, sort of maybe like 8 o'clock if on the clock if you were looking, and the park is sort of, you know, centered around the mountain. And yeah, there are trails that you can walk up, and actually you can walk up to the snow there on the very right-hand side of the picture above the tree. You can get up there without any glacier travel. And then, geez, you're probably getting close to 10,000 feet, I would say. I mean, I'm probably at 8,000 taking this picture. And here are some of the residents of the park. A hoary marmot, and there were a couple others that were doing this sort of wrestling, fighting, playing thing that this one was watching, and so were some other people. On the way down, oops, let me try that again. Where'd you go? Back. Yeah, on the way down, from being in, you know, open, clear sunshine, descending was into the clouds. I think we call that fog when it's on the ground. And there's a bunch of these. These are kind of these trees are subalpine fir. They're real pointy, and are real. They're a classic of higher elevations in the Pacific Northwest. And speaking of the Northwest, north of Rainier, the next national park of note is North Cascades, and you're just about, you got to slam on the brakes or you'll be in Canada. And this is Mount Shuksan, the thrust fault mountain adjacent to Mount Baker, the local volcano resident. And these two, so to the left of this image is what's called Shuksan Arm, that reaches over to, and guess what's on the right of this picture? Yes, Shuksan Arm. And there's a ridge that connects the two, and they are the big kahunas of the North Cascades. I went to school in Bellingham, which is about 50 miles west of there, right on Puget Sound, and the North Cascades are a young mountain range, geologically speaking, and a lot of real broken terrain and dramatic views. And back in the day, made it to the top of Baker and Shuckson a couple times. And speaking of volcanoes, this is heading south, Mount Hood, which is east of Portland, an hour or two, depending on how fast you're driving. And there's this cool cloud cap going on Mount Hood as I was going by. And if you look, actually, on the bottom left hand of this image, there's looks like artifacts. Yeah, it looks like ski lift towers. And this is there's a ski area in the lower part of these slopes below Mount Hood. I really like the cloud cap. And as a matter of fact, I spent the night after I took this picture. I made my way around to a campground at some 1,000 feet called Cloud Cap, and was glad. Yeah, it was a very windy night, and I was glad there was a little bit of cover. My damn tent would have blown away pretty much. And heading north over the border, if you head up to Vancouver, I highly recommend making a stop in Victoria on Vancouver Island, which you can see over on the right-hand side, and the left-hand side is Butchart Gardens, that are world famous. Just will blow your mind. I mean, it's amazing flower. It's like, meadowlark on steroids, 800-pound gorilla version of meadowlark, just very beautiful. And, the flowers are great, but then, you have to compose the whole thing into something coherent and aesthetically balanced. It's composing like we compose, photographs, images, in actually 4D, really. They compose Butchart Gardens because over the course of a year, different flowers and plants are doing different things. Butchart Gardens is, wow, amazing. One of the most amazing gardens I've ever been in. And moving on to from the Vancouver area, I headed east and north up to the Canadian Rockies. And here is a young black bear cruising along. I was driving along this road, and there were about 6 or 7 cars parked, and it was sort of a side, a road cut along the side of a slope, and down at the bottom, this drainage, you can see the creek in the background, and this guy was making his way along, and I believe the boulders may well be riprap or from the road construction, and maybe there for, I think those are kind of man-made or put there, and he was poking along from one to the other, really. So we were, all these people are running up the road to be able to get ahead of them to turn around and take, because you can take a picture of his butt, but not quite the same. Okay, so let me go to my other, for part 2 here from 21. There we go. And then I do slideshow from the beginning. Uh-oh. So can you guys see that all right, or is that working correctly?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Jack, we got you.
Okay, good, cool. So this is 4 years later in 2021. I had previously been in the habit of heading due west when I was going off to camp, hike, and take pictures and all that. But in 21, I decided, you know, there's lots of cool stuff nature-wise south of me. And so I took off and went down the coast to the Keys, and then around the Gulf Coast and around through New Orleans, and made my way along to then to Big Bend, and then it was sort of the Western Circuit. But so the first major stop, Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge, is just about in Florida, pretty close to the border, but it's quite a swamp. And if I were to zoom in, you would see, you can see there's a little bit of land sticking out of the water there, and on the far left-hand side of that land, there's sort of a very small dark shape, which, as you might guess, is the head of a gator. Lots of gators around there. And then this is Spanish moss that was plentiful throughout the refuge. A view across a bunch of swamp, and there was actually a boardwalk that you could follow to a tower, and this was the view from the tower, looking out across part of the refuge. And yeah, there was I bought a folding kayak that sort of folds up into kind of like a large suitcase, and decided I'd been sharing pictures on Facebook of shots of the Potomac from the Potomac Heritage Trail. You can walk along, you know, in Loudoun County, and you know, trying to get a good shot without a bazillion branches in the way is a challenge. And somebody said, "You need a canoe," and I thought, well, yeah, except I don't want to schlep a canoe, storing it and on a rack and blah blah blah. So I ended up getting a kayak that actually I could fit into my car. And my plan was to go kayaking in at Okefenokee. However, this was in 21, in I guess June. Anyway, it was kind of the end of toward the end of pandemic restrictions, and so there were 2 people in the whole place, 2 women who were actually fishing, and each one had a gator like hanging out waiting for them to catch something, but of course they were too fast for the gators. But I chickened out. I wasn't going to go kayaking solo among the gators. If there'd been a few other people, sure, but Anywho, and so into Florida, I went and visited some friends who live in Cocoa Beach, and we go to have lunch, and who's panhandling for food but this is an American ibis, and he was what do you got? Hey, you got a quarter? And this is my friends live on the 10th floor of a building that's on the bay, and that's what it looked like that night. And yeah, to the if I had panned to the right a ways, you could see launch pads 39A, 39B, and various other space-related facilities. Yeah, this friend, she grew up there. Her dad was a NASA contractor, and then I actually met her in LA because they moved to Pasadena to JPL, and she came back to where her old childhood stomping grounds, and there's a pretty dramatic sunset from Cocoa, Florida. So I did finally get there's my kayak, and went down to Homestead and got a place for a couple days to go to. The Keys are breathtakingly expensive if you actually want to stay there. So this is in Key Largo. There is the Pennicamp, I think that's the name, Pennicamp State Park, and these are mangrove swamps, and there are enough people around that I was okay with kayaking there, and there it is. What life? This is the kayak's view of the world, and the mangroves at eyeball level, and there's the front of my kayak. Yeah, this is all iPhone photography. I have still not gotten to a point where I'm so confident that I'm not going to capsize or have problems with water that I will take my real camera out and put it at risk. So, but I mean, iPhones and are doing pretty amazing things anyway in the camera department, for what not night photography and not lots of other things, but and here's a recent resident. This is Key West, and green iguanas are now an invasive species there from South America. But this guy, yeah, I mean, this guy's probably, well, to the end of his tail, he's got to be 4 feet long anyway. Yeah, pretty big lizard. And there I got, I checked the box for the Key West sunset. I had gotten as far south as you can get, and then up at the top of the Keys, Everglades Park, and there's an entrance that is something Palm. I can't remember the name now, but yeah, there's a road, and there's some trails, boardwalk type trails that are very cool. And yeah, there's some serious insect life there. Yeah, these, what we might call a cricket or a grasshopper, those guys are 4 to 5 inches long. But they were pretty amazing looking. Wouldn't like to be swarmed by a bunch of them. And I took this picture on the Anhinga Trail. And now you can see why they call it that. There's a pair of Anhingas. And look at their webbed feet. Guess they spend some time around water, huh? This guy, so cormorants are all over the place. And this guy, you can see how close I was. I mean, he was pretty used to people, and they have the most amazing eyes, these turquoise, bright turquoise blue eyes. And he was just, yeah, how you doing? Whatever. And yeah, the Everglades, you know, a bunch of grass, a bunch of water, and a bunch of, well, boas now from somebody who, I guess, you know, from a pet store or something. Anyway, they let some boas go, and now they're infested. They have periodic hunting programs where they're trying to reduce the population of boa constrictors, big, you know, sort of anaconda-like snakes in the Everglades. Speaking of reptiles, yeah, here's one of the American residents, Mississippi. What is it? Yeah, Crocodilus mississippiensis, something like that. And then heading up the Gulf Coast, outside of Naples, Florida, the Audubon Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary is an amazing place. The picture on the left is one of the many bald cypresses that live in that area, and these vines that are going all over the place. And hibiscus flowers. And yeah, this is real primeval landscape. There's another ibis. This guy's not looking for crumbs. He's taking care of that himself. And a tiger swallowtail on I couldn't tell you. Yeah, and just like the one I took a picture of in Loudoun County a while back. And that is a limpkin. And this guy was showing off a brown anole, displaying his mojo there. Very cool looking guy. And another reptilian denizen of Corkscrew. Don't fall in the water because he's patiently waiting. And then I went on to Sanibel, up the coast a little ways. And this guy was a challenge to get all in focus, but and he was moving around. This crab is, I mean, his shell there is probably like an inch and maybe 2 inches across. And he lives, you know, in a little hole in the ground there, but he's got one claw, and I think all of them are like that. I don't think he's missing anything. A little blue heron. We're so used to seeing many great blues. This one's a little blue having some lunch. And An egret. Oops, it's not a gator. I'm making a liar out of me. Let's see. There we go, gator. Yeah, but actually, the gator's at Gator Point State Park. So I'll have to correct my caption. Yeah, this was a little pool of water not far from the shore, but and then this is so now the clue is to ignore the caption that is wrong, because this isn't even in Florida anymore. This is in Louisiana. That's the levee that is keeping the Mississippi from flooding the houses below. If I were to pan left, you would see a slope, and about 30 feet below this level is a road and a bunch of houses, and everybody's living in these houses. And there's the Mississippi River, you know, which if it weren't, at that level, the water would be above their rooftops. And there's a boat headed up the river. And then moving on to Big Bend, another prickly pear cactus, cousin of the one in Grand Canyon, but not flowering. Yeah, there's some Big Bend landscape. That's Ocotillo on the right-hand side and prickly pear on the left. And some, well, I'm a fan of rocks, so sometimes it's like, if you're not, I will understand. It just looked pretty dramatic. Stuff sticking out of the ground, you know. And here is a cholla cactus in bloom at Guadalupe Mountains National Park in Texas. And an aloe in agave in the aloe family, also in Guadalupe. And a shot of White Sands National Park. Was a monument, now a park. And I think that's, yeah, there's White Sands. Oh, wait a minute. Polar bear? No polar bear. All right, well, let's move on to from White Sands, New Mexico to Carlsbad, New Mexico, and the challenges of photographing in a cave. Amazing. If you haven't been to Carlsbad and you're anywhere near there, I highly recommend it. The folks who did the lighting did a heck of a job. And it's, you know, I felt like as I was descending into the dark and into this world of very strange sights, it was almost like going into, sort of descending into the unconscious, into the world of dreams in the dark, and then coming back out into the daylight and waking reality. There's amazing formations. Speaking of which, above the ground is, these guys are called hoodoos. These are toadstool hoodoos. And this is outside of Kanab, Utah. And as I recall, that day it was 111 degrees. So I'm not sure what I was doing out hiking, but I guess I survived. So, and another, this is an early morning shot of Bryce, and there right below the crowded part of Bryce at Sunrise Point. There's a platform with a rail around it and a whole bunch of people. And these folks just went for a little stroll for a different view. Capitol Reef, that's looking pretty big. Capitol Reef National Park is central southern Utah. I think that's the Golden Throne over there that's sticking up on the right-hand side. And if you go west out of Utah and go into eastern Nevada, you can get to Great Basin National Park, which is kind of one of the lesser known parks in the system, but it's a keeper. Actually, it's high desert, and so it has sort of elements of mountain and desert. And what we're looking at there is Wheeler Peak, which is 13,000 something. I think may even be 9 something, almost 14,000 feet. And in the bottom of the picture, well, and also over to the side, but in the middle bottom, you can see some bristlecone pines, and these trees can live 3, 4, even 5,000 years. Think about what, well, I was going to say what they've seen. Of course, they haven't seen our goings on, but they have been around that long. And one of the cool things about Great Basin National Park is they have some caves as well. And this is got a shot from a tour I did below the ground after I did some above the ground. And this is leaving Nevada, going to California. This is Mobius Arch in the Alabama Hills, Eastern Sierra. And yeah, this is kind of the east and below, not too far from Mount Whitney, which is, you know, the top of the Sierras in Central California. And not far from that is Mono Lake, which if you come out of Yosemite and head down the east side, down to Lee Vining, you'll see Mono Lake. And these towers are now much more visible after the city of Los Angeles and a bunch of Southern California drained about 40 vertical feet of water over a few decades. You got to keep the on screen somehow, right? Anywho, there's a osprey family that made their nest in the top of one of these tufa towers. Yes, they do. These two were born on Tufa Tuesday. A wide shot of a bunch of granite in Yosemite, and some closer. It looks like this. I'm not quite sure how this got truncated, but I really liked the colors and the texture. The composition is lacking at this point, but maybe you can see some of the elements that were appealing nonetheless. And this is Northern California coast. And again, I've got a formatting problem, but I really liked the reflections of the birds and the rock, and sort of a quiet morning overcast. And speaking of ancient bristlecone pines, this same species lives east of the Sierras and the White Mountains in California at about 11,000 feet. And that's where I first saw them. The same kind of tree as we saw in Great Basin. And these guys, you know, they're specialists at high elevation, killer, you know, drought and temperature, and they outcompete. They're the only kind of tree up at that elevation. Pretty amazing. Dude, surf's up. Yeah, that's where the heck? Central California coast. When I came across, I was in Sacramento and then cut across and came out at this beach, and there were some humans in the water. And I kind of like this one. Brown pelicans doing their pelican thing. And then in the close-up department, we've got a couple of aliens in the sand looking for breakfast. And then, yeah, those are succulents in the aloe family that were right by the beach at the top of, yeah, just above the sand. Central California coast, and Mom actually had two little ones that the grass was tall enough that you can't see them in this picture, but she was like, yeah, what? And some Oregon coast. And then I found there had been this rumor, and I was able to confirm it, that there was a place where the heart of the Oregon coast lived and breathed. And I found it and took a picture in the left-hand image there. And the trip that I made back to the amazing beach is that same, the one in the right-hand image, minus the amazing stuff that was going on in the sand. Still a great beach and head, but and then we're off to a temperate rainforest. We think of rainforests and tropical. This one is in Washington State on the Olympic Peninsula in Olympic National Park, the Hoh River rainforest that drains off of Mount Olympus and out into the Pacific. And it's amazing, lots of mosses and ferns and stuff growing all over the place. And if you pop out of that mossy bower, it looks kind of like this. And this is the Hoh River. And yeah, it's fast and chilly and draining off the glaciers of Mount Olympus. Mount Olympus.
Hey, Jack, just doing a time check.
Yeah. And I am just about out. So that's Mount Olympus, the middle of the Olympic Peninsula. There I am in Olympic Park, and there's I don't take pictures of signs, I swear. It seems so silly. But this one, there was something that was evident right there. I was at the place, I could look at it, and you can see the difference between, well, 105 years, and there goes the glacier. And looking that same place where I did the selfie, if you turn around and look out over Puget Sound, it looks kind of like that. And if you look carefully, about a third of the way over from the right-hand edge, you can see a white blob. That is Mount Rainier. And there's the San Juan Islands at sunset in Puget Sound at Larrabee State Park outside of Bellingham, Washington. And I believe that is a golden eagle at Steens Mountain in Southeast Oregon. And then here's a guy who's desert is a bighorn. Looks kind of desert bighorn style. And I mentioned Steens Mountain, where that other picture of the eagle was. There are wild horses that live out in the Steens Mountain wilderness. And so I got the chance to, with a long lens, get kind of near them. There's a foal that's going for some lunch from mama there. And there is Mount Rainier, looking a whole lot less snowy than you usually see it. That's from Mowich Lake in August. And yeah, it's, some people go, that can't be Rainier, but yes, it is. And back to the North Cascades, I went looking for mountain goats. And I was very happy to find some of the above, Ptarmigan Ridge, right by Mount Baker, which we had pictures of from the last time around. And this one, now it was with wreathed in clouds. And then on to Wyoming, back to Yellowstone. And guess what was happening at that time? That's right, the rut. And the bulls were causing mayhem and confusion in the mammoth entrance and to the park. Traffic was all, yeah, it was pretty amazing. I even somewhere I was going to play a video. If you've ever heard a elk bugle, you could hear one if I were to play this. And there's just kind of a idyllic landscapey Yellowstone. Bison bathe in the dust. Bison to bison, dust to dust. And that is my presentation. Thank you for your patience. I hope you enjoyed some of the pictures. Appreciate the opportunity.
Excellent. Thank you for Jack. A great discussion about all these different places, most of them in North America, it seems. Definitely appreciate you sharing your experiences and your photography with us. So appreciate the help. With that, I'm going to stop the recording.